Well, folks, welcome back to another episode of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And again, I always like to say I'm not a corporate sellout, but yet I am. Here with Mr. Bob Mersereau. And Bob, we're going to jump right in. This came about, I was at a school and I found your book, The Top 100 Albums. Mm-hmm. And I made a comment about it being subjective, and you jumped right in, and you had a couple of comments. For starters, how did you come about doing this book?
Well, it all started when the publishing company, Goose Lane here in Fredericton, who are a national company, great distribution and such, and they came to me and wanted me to do a particular music book. And at first I said, yeah, sure. And then I thought about their idea a bit. And one time I was stewing over it and something else popped into my head, which was this idea. And what I suggested back to them, because at that point in time in Canada, which was 2007, there'd never been a really nice coffee table book about Canadian music, Canadian, mostly pop and rock music, and, popular stuff from the 60s, 70s on. And I thought to myself, why not celebrate it? And I said, well, what am I going to do about this? I can list my favorites, but then I'll have people getting mad at me all the time. So I did this big survey of people in the music world, from disc jockeys to musicians themselves to record company people to roadies to, everybody I could find. There was about 600, and I asked them to pick their favorite Canadian albums of all time, and then I just did the math after that. So when you posted your thing, I follow you already, and I said, well, just my it is subjective, but it wasn't just me.
Sure.
It was sort of I took a broad Canadian survey and came up with the list that way.
Well, it's an expansive list of credits of who was involved, and I did read it, and obviously I recognize a lot of them. Part of there was a couple things that hit me because I went through it. The first probably 10 to 12. No surprises there for me.
Yeah,
you start getting a little deeper into the book, and some of the ones that hit a nerve for me, and I'll explain. So I was in a band in the 90s that played at Halifax that had some success. However, the whole grunge movement started. We weren't that. We were forced to move to Toronto to kind of make our way. So you had albums in there by Sloan, which I can I guess relate to because they were big. Eric's Trip was one that I was like, because I do remember those guys. Band from Moncton who had some success. Thrush Hermit, which actually Joel Plaska came out of. They were, like I say, I'm not going to say they were deep cuts. They were a little further down the list, but they obviously get quite a lot of feedback to be in there.
Yeah, I think it was part of it is you got to remember the era which the book was done, which was 2007 when it was sending out the list. So that was still really hot. I think today, if you did the book again, it'd be a much different list. There'd be newer bands, but also there are particular eras that wouldn't stand up as well as they did then. I think a lot of the record reviewer, college, the Toronto newspaper people, and you have to, there are a lot of them, so they get a lot of votes. They had a particular fondness for that era at the time, and I don't think that would be there anymore. Not to that extent, so it would change. I think there are artists that have proven themselves over the years, like your Neil Youngs and Joey Smith. They're always going to be there, as you said. They're the Rush, and they're always going to be the top 10. I don't think that those positions have changed. But after that, it is subjective all the way through. And I'm always fascinated as to what becomes part of the canon, the greater stuff 30 years on. That's what I want.
Well, and so, I mean, the thing for me, and I poured over the book. I've been through it a bunch now since I saw it. Hamilton Spectator, right on the cover, says it's a must read. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's a friend of mine. Yeah, well, there you go. Hey, whatever you can take it makes sense. But I poured through it. I looked in the the appendix to see if I could find anything. And a band that I couldn't find in there that was omitted that seems very strange to me was Triumph.
Yeah, Triumph didn't get any love at all, and I bet you they would now.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because for a while there, I was talking to about doing liner notes for one of their reissues, and I was going, "Oh man, I hope they don't read the book."
Fair enough.
But it it surprised me, but I think at that point there was a bit of a hard rock bias, that isn't there now. I know my kids, who were in their who were young at the time. Now they're all in their 20s. They're the ones that are would be going, where are the guitars, so that's
Fair
come
enough.
back to that. It's just it's always this cyclical thing. Right now, harder bands are getting a little more love. Hard rock is often, it gets a tough rap. uh Mostly, again, there's that critical thing that wants to pay attention to the lyrics, and
Yeah.
as opposed to the riffs, and I understand all that. I've done it all, and that's one nice thing about being a music reporter is you get to hear it all, and you get to kind of lower your prejudices about certain kinds of music. I can listen to jazz and then put on a country album right side by each and find things to love. So it's yeah, no, Triumph. I agree with you. That's the
Well,
that's the thing. They should have did it.
what was surprising for me, because we do this, we've we started out in Atlantic Canada, but we've gone stateside quite a bit.
Yeah.
And every time we talk to the people in the States, and we talked to Eric Martin from Mr. Big and guys like that, they always mention Triumph and they always mention April Wine. And we kind of go like, especially April Wine, because they're from our neck of the woods here.
Yeah. And what the reason for that is those two bands put a heck of a lot of work into touring hockey rinks at the time when that people were going to a show a week in those major markets and middle markets, right through, and they did it. They knew what the game was. And Miles, I've talked to him a few times about this. They once roller hit for them in the States, once they had that foot in the door, with when they went harder, faster, as they called the album. Brian Greenway came in. They slogged it out, and they did that work, and Americans especially appreciate that and stay strong fans through that. So yeah, American. I was asked a couple of years, 5-6 years ago, to write a book for the American market, the history of Canadian rock and roll, and it's amazing what the difference is in the way they see in the States. They see Canada's music. They don't even think of Joni Mitchell and Neil Young because they think they're Americans.
No, that's fair ball. And I mean,
Right, yeah.
You mentioned Miles and you mentioned Rower. We haven't had him on the show yet. We're working on it. But in October, one of my bands had the privilege of opening for Haywire. It was their first show that they were back in quite some time. We played on the Saturday night. Miles was out. We didn't know. He was sitting kind of up in the corner. A bar called Monty's here in Dartmouth.
Yeah.
And we did
JD
Roller.
singing.
JD was singing. He did a fab job.
Yeah.
So we do Roller, and I'm walking off the stage, and one of my friends comes and says, Miles here's here. And I'm like, oh. So anyway, we went outside, and he came up to me, and he gave me some very, very nice compliments on my playing, and he said that we did a great job. And all I said was, I hope you didn't think we were doing it to. He goes, no, you guys did a great job. He was very gracious, and that for me was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, he's a great guy, and he's loving being back in the Maritimes. I should mention I have a new book coming out in May, I think it is, and it's the 50 biggest East Coast artists of all time.
Oh, wow. Now that'll be something.
So, yeah, watch out for some controversy there.
Well, you know what? That's interesting, though, because like that you say that, because I mean, obviously, I'm a rock guy. That's what I grew up in. And so when I'm in Toronto and somebody says, what about this band from? And I'm like, but you got to give it, we're kind of, our geography sometimes limits us in a way. And when anybody can make it out of our neck of the woods, I think you got to give them props.
Yeah. And it's been a hard, to build to that. You're interesting. You mentioned Haywire, and they're in the book, and they, for good reason, they were, in the 80s, they were the Maritime's biggest rock band, no question. And other than April Wine, but there was, they weren't a Maritime band at that point. But the Haywire, got together with a specific aim. They, they were telling me, they broke up 3 other bands so that the guys who wanted to get off the island, make it in the Maritimes, get out of the Maritimes, make it nationally, could form this group and really go for it. But you had to think and plan to do that. That's what it took to get out of our geographic region at that point. This was before, or the Celtic explosion and everything happened. So it was tough. And Miles, the original April Wine, that was the same with them. They got together. They didn't want to play covers for dances anymore. And that's really all you could do in Atlantic Canada at that point. You couldn't be a singer-songwriter kind of person, or at least in the pop world. You had to play dances. That's all you could get hired for. So they got together as April Wine. They might have had, I think it was probably around 10 gigs before they left and went to Montreal. But that was always the plan. We're gonna, have our own material. To do that, they have to leave. Now you don't. But it took those guys a lot of hard work to make that happen for today.
Well, and it's, the missionary work, I guess you could say. We started Barstools, and it was interesting because I came up, I started in the late 80s. And, I was always hearing about the Oakleys and the Minglewoods and the Siam Moons and all these guys. And they, our show started out kind of as, we thought it was going to be a 2 to 5 week thing and COVID was going to be done. And here we are almost 2 years later, but there was this huge appetite for people, not only in Atlantic Canada, but there's people out west that were from here that really latched onto it pretty quickly. Yep. As you're writing this book about the top 50, and, I don't want to give it away because,
that's fine. Yeah.
There's going to be, you mentioned April Wine Haywire, they wouldn't be surprises. Would you say there might be a surprise to you that made the list?
No, because I made the list.
Fair enough.
For this, in this case. Well, I mean, there were ones that the more I thought about it, it's really tough when it's easy to go Anne Murray, Great Big Sea, Rankins, April, there's ones that are going to be there, Stompin' Tom, right? But then you start to think of all the various regions and how this music got out there and how that, why do we all know Eyes the Bye from Newfoundland? Right. Yep. Why can we all sing that by heart? It wasn't Great Big Sea doing it. It happened way before. And it happened because of a guy named Harry Hibbs for the most part. And he was a Newfoundlander who, once Newfoundland joined Confederation, now people from Newfoundland were going all over Canada, and there was much more ability for their songs to get out to the rest of the country. And they started getting played at folk festivals and things like that. Well, Harry Hibbs had a TV show in Ontario. He was a guy who'd moved up to Toronto to work in construction, and he happened to play button accordion, and he wrecked his leg at his actually I think it was a factory work, and he wrecked his leg, so he couldn't work. So he got up on stage one night at one of these at this club that was a bar just for Newfoundlanders. Anyway, it was so popular that they got their own TV show. And all here every week you could watch him and watch the dancers and hear all these great Newfoundland songs. So that's how this kind of stuff spread. So yeah, Harry, when you realize how important a Harry Hibbs was to a Great Big Sea, it's just you have to draw those lines. So that's what I love, and how important Minglewood and Dutch Mason were. Dutch Mason, there was really no national blues scene until the 70s, and there were two acts responsible for building the national blues of Canada. One was Down Child and the other was Dutch. Touring back and forth across the country and making it, down in the Maritimes, everybody went to see blues bands. I mean, going in the 70s, you in here in Fredericton, where I live, one week it would be Dutch, the next week it'd be Minglewood, the third week it'd be Oakley, and the fourth week it'd be some band from Ontario that nobody liked.
Yeah,
but they're trying to tour them, and we couldn't wait to have Minglewood come back, and so he'd play East Coast blues for us again. And you'd go 2 or 3 times to the tavern that week just to see it. And so we had that blues scene. And it was great to talk to all these people, the ones who are still with us, and build that history of East Coast music, show how it's interconnected and how it's spread and how vastly different it is from Acadian music to jazz to opera to it's great.
Yeah, and I mean, for me to try to describe the music in this region to some of my friends that don't live here is pretty tough, because it's, you mentioned Harry Hibbs. I mean, when I used to go visit my grandmother in Glace Bay, it was always Harry Hibbs and Roger Whittaker. And I mean, the first album she let me play that was rock was Van Halen 1. But it took a while, and hopefully she was in the house. So that book's coming out in May.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like the East Coast Hall of Fame.
Well, and I'll be interested.
I won't say all the artists.
Well, you said 50. You said 50.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to put this one together?
Oh, let's see. I guess it was about a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a year and a half of concentration on. But the hardest part was nailing it down to 50, and numbers 51 and 52 are the hard ones to.
Yeah. So I said I was going to be respectful of your time, but I did want to ask.
Oh, no worries.
Question. You did the top 100. How long did it take you to do that, from research to survey to finished product on the shelf?
I'd say about a year and a half for that one too. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. And that a lot of it was the surveys and getting the lists back to, and interviews. I mean, we talk about these list books, but really they're just excuses to tell the stories, right? To do the interviews with the artists, to write it, because that's the best part. You can argue the lists back and forth, but go in and read the stories, read what they are telling you and the histories, and it's fascinating. It's fantastic stuff, and there's not enough of it in Canada. There's not enough of our own popular music being written about. There's way too much American stuff still, way too much British. We're constantly besieged by it. Everybody watched the Beatles thing on whatever it was on Netflix or whatever, the Get Back, but try and get them to watch documentary on a maritime band.
Well, and I will say, I'll give them a little plug. The one for Triumph came out last Monday, and I haven't seen it yet, but awesome. Look, I want to thank you for doing this, and I'll tell you why. Because when I saw the book and stuff, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to make a comment, and lo and behold, you jump on, and I said, I'm a man of my word.
Well, you tagged me.
Well, hey, I've been tagging a lot of people just for we'll call it the pissed off factor of not being able to play music. But I do appreciate you doing this. I do appreciate you coming on. What I would like to say is I'm going to be in Fredericton soon, and when I do, hopefully you'll allow me to buy you a beer as a thanks.
Oh gosh, you and Great Big C. Everybody's always trying to feed me liquor. All right, I'll be there.
I'll twist your arm.
That's one of the stories in the book. It's the one that's coming out, the Top 50 East Coasters. Is the first time I met them, they phoned me up at CBC where I was working, and they insisted I come down, and then they insisted I meet with them after, and they insisted on buying me a Guinness. And then by the time they'd done that to me a few times, they had insisted on coming in for a radio interview the next day. So
Anything to elevate their spot in the top 50.
They
Look
were
like-
unknown at the time. This is their first ever
Okay.
tour. Nobody had heard of them off the island. So
Fair enough. Well,
that's
thanks.
how they did it.
Thanks so much for doing this, Bob. And where can they
All
find
right.
this book when it's out?
Oh, it'll be in all the bookstores and Amazon and Chapters and
Super.
all the regular spots. And I'll always say independent bookstores are the best.
Absolutely, my friend. Thanks so much for doing this. You were a man of great knowledge, and I'm glad that we finally met. And I look forward to seeing this book when it's out.
All right. Always great to talk music.
Thanks, folks. We'll talk to you soon. This is Sean,
Okay.
Rimshots.